Good evening, it's Joyful Hermit. I would thought before I do the fourth doctrine or basic knowledge that God gave to Catherine of Genoa that include the four last things that we too can be pondering but actually occur when we're in our spiritual progression process and then when we physically die, pass over, and continue our process, with the exception of those who have totally negated God when they're dying or as they have died. They want nothing to do with God, and she talks about that we, in essence, have cast ourselves into a hell of our own creation, of never then going to have that opportunity to be united in pure love, to become pure, our soul to become pure love, to be the pure love that our soul is in its origins. But I thought instead of going on with that I would just share, and there might be more that come to mind later, times that people have come to me after they were dead. People who I've known. There were people who I didn't know who came. And I might mention a couple of those that came. And the first one that I recall was a soldier from the Vietnamese War. And maybe I knew the person, maybe it was someone from high school that I knew, or college who went to war, to the Vietnam War, and died. I don't know. But it was a soldier who came, and he had been killed, but he came as he looked when he had been killed, in uniform, the helmet on, and he was like half crawling, half lumbering down a hallway into my bedroom. This was in the little house that I was able to get finally to have for my children when we lived in Southern California. And it was after my grandmother had appeared to me, and it was before Marari came, the Virgin Mary came, but she came in a different form, or a different, more of an Asian looking features, and said her name was Marari, which is a name for Mary in, and it's also the name of that tribe of in the Old Testament. The underneath the Levites was Marari, one of the 12 tribes, and they were responsible for protecting the tent of the tabernacle. So she had come actually with great peace to reassure me that I would be taken care of, my household would be okay, would be protected, because I was having all these things happen. And I had since learned, after this soldier came down, that I can send people away. If I'm uncomfortable, if I was frightened, all I had to do was say. And so I had done with that with the soldier, because it was what I was talking about, that God explained, or the Holy Spirit explained to Catherine of Genoa, and that she repeated, that of the things that she experienced, if many of them had occurred earlier on or in a full state of the power of God, the soul would be annihilated. We couldn't take it. And that was frightening to me. I didn't know how to handle it when that soldier came. I knew that he had been killed in war. I didn't even look carefully. Of course, his face was all dirty and bloody, and he was shot up, and but moving, and sort of half loping, or arms down to helping to get on the ground, coming down that hallway toward my bedroom. And I did say, "You'll need to leave. I'm sorry. You'll need to leave." And he immediately dissipated. But I prayed, even so, because I understood he had come for some reason. He needed prayer for his soul, is what I felt was what he needed, that he was not in heaven. There was absolutely no light around him. It was just a sort of the darkness of the hallway. It was in the night. I was awakened to see this. And I felt sorrow, tremendous sorrow. And I understood that he had been killed. And I knew it was the Vietnamese War. How I knew, I don't know. I just knew. It was something given to me, a knowing. No words were spoken, but I just knew that. And I knew that he wasn't in heaven, and that he had likely come after I got over the shock of it, and had sent him away. Please, you need to leave. I might have even said, I can't handle this. I can't handle it. But I did apologize in my room, and then said, I'm sorry, it's too much for me, and I'm sorry, but I will pray for you. Pray for your soul. And I did pray for that soldier. And then I think Marari came. With her, I know it was peaceful, but I also asked questions. Who are you? And what's your name? And where are you from? And I was not Catholic. I did not recognize the traditional, or one of the traditional Our Lady of Grace stances of the Virgin Mary in visions and in major, excuse me, my phone. So I did say, I'm sorry, I to her. I didn't realize. I just thought it was a woman there at the foot of my bed, and I said, I'm still trying to get used to this, and I'm uncomfortable. And she immediately also left. But with her, I looked up Marari, and I knew it was in the Bible. I just figured it had to be. But I still didn't make the connection. Not until I was Catholic and saw. I suspected. I knew it was a beautiful, peaceful woman. And I understood that her message to me was that she was protecting my household, that my home would be okay. I would be, not my physical home, but my surroundings, my children. We had been having a lot of demonic activity in that house. And an aunt actually had told me what to do. Surprised me. I didn't think the aunt was that spiritual or religious. She told me to go room by room and stand in the room. I think she even told me to make the sign of the cross. And she wasn't Catholic, and she wasn't active in any church, but she told me that I needed to say out loud, in the name of Jesus Christ, who died on the cross and shed his blood for me, depart this room and never come back. And do it to each room, which I did, including the hallway, and entry hall and the hallway to the bedrooms, because we were having demonic influence there. And that's, at first I didn't know what it was with the soldier either, as he was coming down the hall toward me, not in good shape. And his face, oh, the look on his face. It's probably how he looked when he was shot. It was terror. It was a look of terror. And I feel bad to this day. In fact, I'll consider talking about this as a prayer, and I will, when I'm finished, I will pray again for his soul. I haven't had anything since. That's been years ago. So I am hoping and praying that he is in heaven now, that he had made his spiritual journey, has continued to proceed or make progression. And I don't know if he was someone who had rejected God. I just don't know. I guess I should ask. But I pray anyway. because in this last section, Catherine does get indication from God that the souls that actually cast themselves into hell are very tough cases. They are, that God does all he can to have souls make it to the point where they are open to him, where they're not rejecting him, that they have not outright rejected him and don't want anything to do with God. That there are a lot of souls that we probably know, people who don't really have much to do with God, but they haven't outright rejected him. So, and God will do all he can to rescue souls, to have souls continue on, or even as it can be, begin their, I'm going to shut this off. Why on earth? Goodness sakes. Noisy phone. To even practically begin a spiritual life once they've died, a knowing spiritual progression. So it's best for us to be well on our way, if not far on our way, because there are some who die and then shortly after do have union. Their souls unite with pure love, with God, pure love, and then their souls become pure love with God's pure love. So that is the ultimate in our spiritual evolution. And those who can progress in this lifetime are far ahead. Not that it's a race or anything, I don't mean like, but for themselves, for the goal of our existence is union with God and to become love. And as she was told, to return, our soul to return, to be at its origin, at its pure origin of what our soul was. Back in its origin was pure love. God looked upon ours. He created our souls in purity. But all that we accumulate has to be, she uses the example of being burned, like gold, 24 karat gold that is purified. And it, of course, once it's purified, there's really not much left of any of the substance, because so much of metal is not the pure. So anyway, she uses that example. But so that was that man. And of course, the Virgin Mary she's in heaven. It wasn't a case of a soul in purgatory. And then I had my uncle come. He had passed away. His wife had had a severe stroke and was in a nursing home, unable to speak. Some thought that she couldn't recognize anyone, but she barely squeezed my hand when I visited and held her hand and asked her to let me know if she recognized that I was there, and she lightly squeezed my hand in recognition. But she hadn't died yet, but she was maybe 2 to 3 weeks from when she was going to die. But my uncle appeared one morning by the side of my bed on this side. In fact, it was this bed frame, and I was sleeping on this side, another side over here. And my uncle was crying. I had never seen him in life like that. He had died probably 3 years prior. And I woke up to him standing there by my bed, sobbing. His face was red with upset and great sadness. And he pleaded with me to please, there was no light shining around him. no light. He was there as my uncle in life would look, but he had all this red face and tears, and it was upsetting to see him so upset. And he asked me, he asked me to please go through on behalf of my aunt, to go through a process, and he asked me to have a priest come. My uncle asked this as he stood by my bed. He was deceased 3 years, crying and saying, please, for your aunt, for Aunt Louise, have this priest come and go through with a priest on behalf of your aunt any of the vices, to go through them in a type of a confessional aspect on behalf of her. My uncle was pleading with me to do this because she couldn't speak and be forgiven, and couldn't speak to or do it herself. So I called the parish priest, and that's the one when I explained to him. And he had known of my uncle. My uncle was a judge for years in the town. Wasn't Catholic. My aunt wasn't Catholic either. But my uncle came to me. I had become Catholic. And the priest just said, he says, oh, you're just ridiculous to me on the phone, I'd been having a pain seat, so I couldn't get up. And my children were gone that weekend. My son was gone, maybe to a friend's. My daughters were in college. So I was there alone in the house. And it was tough to see my uncle like that, sobbing and begging me. And then this priest, he just says, oh, you're so messed up, or something like that to me. He says, take some pain pills and don't call me again. He says, this is just crazy. He says, that just sounds ridiculous. So I called my spiritual father. He wasn't my spiritual father yet, but I had met him and spoken to him. And the first time I met him, I had a vision happen in this chapel of this convent it was demonic that came at me. And I was shaken. I asked one of the sisters, this was on a Friday night after an adoration period time, and the sister said, well, this one sister that I'd become friends with, Sister Henrietta, she's gone to bed or something like this, maybe like 7:30 or 8, but the chapel time was over. I had remained in prayer and had this demonic experience there in the chapel. This from a painting came alive and came down toward. It was demonic. It was evil. It was the devil was after me. And so this other sister said no, but I could tell I was shaken. This was not connected with my uncle there. I'm just explaining how I met this priest then, my spiritual father. So I met him, talked with him that evening, and he asked me questions about myself. And so that's how I got to know him. So that's when this happened with my uncle standing by the bed one morning, asking me to do these things and to get a priest to listen as I would go over every vice. And then I would, on behalf of my aunt, who couldn't speak and was, we thought, not even aware at all, and maybe not aware. She'd had terrible, massive stroke. But to ask God's forgiveness on my aunt's behalf for each vice known with a category. Well, I explained this to this priest at the convent. He's a chaplain there. He was retired. And he says, well, I haven't heard anything ever like this. But he says, I'm coming over. I'm coming over. So he came over, told him where I lived. It wasn't far, actually, and from the convent. And might have been a Saturday morning. And I had a list of all the vices. Of course, he knew them. But he read them. He would say the vice, and I would make an apology to God on behalf of my Aunt Louise, of any one that she had offended or anything she'd done in that category of sin, of vice. Down each one, the priest, it wasn't a typical kind of confession, so she wasn't there but to do any absolution or anything like that, but he said the prayer. And he invited me to say a prayer, and I did, asking God to please forgive any sins of my aunt, and on behalf of her, if in fact she could not do this on her own, which was why my uncle had come to me, because she couldn't. He was in holy terror for my aunt, for his wife. But the shape in which he came, there was no light around him, in great distress, unlike anything I would have ever seen him in life. He was a tough judge. He lived to be, I think it was 83 or 84, and was not a soft, cuddly type person. He was strong and very independent, and I didn't know. I knew he was in progression, or he had been even sent back, was allowed to come from hell, because he was in quite a state. And to me it seemed like he was probably in purgatory. And what I was told came more infused from him. But it was his voice and everything, but it wasn't like in the room. I heard it was more direct into. So that leads me to believe, and as I got more experience with different people who come, to sort of know the signals of if they are in progression, heading toward union with God, even though it may be way at the beginning practically. My uncle rarely went to church. I don't know that he prayed. He was a tough guy. He was very stern. He had been, as a boy, he had a very strict father. And my uncle had been, especially with his son. So, it sort of comes if a child is overly disciplined or something, then he can tend to do that. They don't know different, unless in our time period, it's better we have social media and more conscious awareness of corporal punishment and how it's not really the best punishment. So I don't know, but he had been quite a heavy drinker in life, but I don't know, as far as being a judge, what all maybe had transpired. He was very intelligent, and he was a very moral person, though, in other ways. A very good person, very just person, honest. But the drinking later, that wasn't good for him, nor for his family. But he was, I felt, this was my sense, that God had allowed him to come to me And why me was because he knew I was receptive, that the veil was thin to me. I didn't realize that at the time, but I was starting to put it together, that why would he come to me for this? And also, I had a means of, he had a respect. Not in life, they were like the rest of the family, the aunts and uncles, very against Catholicism. In fact, they'd had a daughter who married a Catholic, and it was upsetting to them at first. They accepted and all, but it wasn't what they would have chosen because of all this anti-Catholic indoctrination that went on, and I think still does, in many people's minds, and through their parents and their grandparents, and just passed on down from the Reformation on, or whenever the ancestors ceased being Catholic and became Protestant. So that was an experience that was really something, and thanks be to God for Father F for doing that, for trusting and knowing that I wouldn't. He knew. He said he knew by my voice on the phone. He could sense that this was actual and very serious and very important. But he didn't go against anything that he shouldn't have done. So that's why it wasn't it couldn't have been the rubrics of the in-person kind of confession. But he adapted a means to accomplish what my uncle had specifically said he needed to happen for his wife on earth. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, she did pass on. And I was shown in a dream, maybe a month or 6 weeks later, my aunt came back to me in a dream and was grateful, and she had made it, not into heaven yet, but she had made it to where she was proceeding. And that was such a major relief for me because I had no idea, with the shape that my uncle was in, whether he had made it into starting the process to keep going, or if he was in hell. And so I did pray for him. I hope that he has, but I have not been shown anything since. Not that I would. I don't have to be. I never expect anything. I never seek anything. Part of that is curiosity I don't consider curiosity as being what's needed spiritually. I'm more like trust, and that God knows, and I just do what I'm asked if it discerns as important and as valid. And in that case, I knew it was. I was shaken by that. But I was desperate to do what he asked because I knew if not, my aunt, who I loved, she was in jeopardy, obviously. For someone to be allowed to come back and ask, and I was awake. I was awake when he stood by the bed. It wasn't like I'd been asleep and in a dream or anything. I was fully awake. And looked, there he was, but she came in a dream and thanked me, and I was shown her going on into, wasn't bathed in light, but she was going to be progressing, or that she had already started to progress. So that was wonderful to know. I was very reassured because when you're asked to do something like that, I thought, well, did I do it right? I was to have her take on her intentions, her heart, her apologies, her remorse, and I did my best. So, and God was gracious, um, and I do hope for my uncle that he has progressed. Um, it can seem like forever because God is in a time. God does not operate in our time frame. God is timeless, as Scripture says. 1 hour can seem like 1,000 days to God. It's or either or 1,000 days can seem like an hour. So we're the ones in time. God gave us time. He doesn't need time. That the aspect of time. He's timeless. So that was that one. And then I'm not going in any particular order now. I've had people just from my past come for different things. But this is one that I had was a cousin who had passed away. He didn't want any of us cousins to know he even was sick. And all of a sudden we're hearing that he had died. He had died of cancer. He didn't have any memorial service. He didn't want anything. He had been really grieving when his wife died of cancer. He and his wife were soulmates. And they had 2 children who were adults when the mother died, and very young adults when the mother died. And the one might have been in college or even finishing up high school, and another one just out of college maybe. But my cousin really grieved, and he had a girlfriend, but he never married again because his soulmate had died. That was just how it was. But he got cancer. His siblings knew, but knew they weren't to tell anyone. And then he passed away, and we got this news. Well, one of his brothers is a minister. I'm not, maybe a Pentecostal minister or something. And very, very devout, very biblical. I think I was viewed a bit askance, and I knew that since I became Catholic, and I think some of the cousins picked up that I was different of some sort. And I probably said things even of a spiritual nature without realizing. And word spread that I was off the deep end maybe a little bit, or a little bit extreme, a little bit goofy. So, but the cousin who had died came to me in a dream, and there was a glass between us. So there was still a partition, but it was very clear glass. And he was on the other side, and behind him was sunlight, much, much light, extreme light. He wasn't himself just bathed in light like he was in heaven, but he was close, very close to that. But yet in purgatory or progression. He was still being purged, the final purging, but that he had all this light behind him and shining down, not over him, but there was still that partition. So I have come to know from the various ones who have come, and then be shown them. Some of them I'm shown after they have had union, and their souls have been purified, and they are in heaven. Then they are bathed in light, and there is no partition. There's either usually a partition, or they can't look at me directly, or they can't speak to me directly. Or they can speak to me, but they can't look at me. Or they can look at me, but there's a partition. So there's always one of three possibilities going on that has always been the indicator to me that they are in process but have not yet arrived in the fullness of Christ's light, in the fullness of perfection, in the fullness of pure love, God's pure love, being in union with pure love, and their souls fully perfected. So that was him. So it wouldn't leave me how his brother had expressed after he had died, how he was worried about Bill, about his brother. And because his brother hadn't been a churchgoer, especially after his wife died, but he wasn't like his brother, the minister, who was very, very into church and Jesus and the Bible. But also maybe a little bit, I don't want to say rigid, staunch or set, very set in the amount or the degree, because he was very much for Jesus and Scripture and the Bible, very, very Bible oriented. Well, and I am too, but what did I say? Maybe more literal, or there's the Eucharist also. There's a lot. Some just get Bible only, and that's all they have is Bible. So when I became Catholic, I had 7 sacraments. So I had the Bible, but I also had communion, Eucharist, consecrated host, the blood and body of Christ, his real presence. I had sacrament of reconciliation, confirmation. When I die, that will be a sacrament. So my vows, I think there's more spiritual in some churches than others. And his brother was not in that spiritual openness or mode. But I didn't realize how much not. So I finally decided it wasn't leaving me, so that usually means I need to act on my instinct. I called him and I said, I get these things sometimes, these little incidents that happen, or that someone will come, and I said that I had a visit in a beautiful lucid dream of your brother, and he's okay. He's okay. In fact, he's doing very well. And I said, I think he wants you to be reassured because you were worried about him, about his status. If he even thought he wasn't even going to make it, would be in hell. So that's a horrible thing for him to worry about for his brother. And so I said, no, he is, and I said he is very close to having union with God. He had all this light around him. He wasn't yet fully there, fully immersed or bathed in it. But I said there was still like a partition. Well, I didn't get much further than saying he was all right, and I didn't even get into describing how. I gotta go. I'll call you back. I'll call you back sometime. He couldn't take that. It was too spiritual. And I think he thought I was outright nuts, because I think he was pretty sure from his viewpoint of what he feels or thinks, that if you aren't very, very devout and all, you don't even stand a chance. So I don't think he believed that his brother was okay or would be. And he never called me back, and I doubt if he'll ever, because it shook him up. But I went with what my gut was saying to do. I didn't have any regret that I did that, because we have to die to ourselves. Maybe it was too much too soon. Maybe I should have called, maybe I did even leave a message. I don't remember. But set it up a little slower for him. Or maybe explain something else that I had experienced that had occurred that lets me know about these things. Maybe he would have been a little more accepting then. But I tried, and his brother is okay. And I'm assuming by now he's already in heaven. He's in heaven means in union with God. Become pure love with pure love. Be transformed into pure love with God's pure love. United. And in the fullness of this glorious light that I always see around souls that are in heaven. So then let's see what. This is getting sort of long. I think I'll save my mom and dad for another time. But trying to think if there was anyone else that I know there have been. I guess I just remember the ones that I know. But I know I've had people come to me who, yes, oh, like a man in the church. Let me know that he was in process. He wasn't bathed in full light, didn't have all that light, but he was in process, and he was able to give me a message after he had passed. It was about 6 or 8 months, 6 months at least, 7 months after he had passed, of something he wanted me to do for him. It was a good enough thing, but it ended up being, the priest didn't like that I was what happened, but that's a story I probably need to tell. It just shows how God will reach into our world for something that I was to do, and this man actually, involved him. He had been on the parish council. He had come to me and asked me to take his place on the parish council. But I wasn't on it for long. The priest was outraged, but I had caught the priest in a wrong, as far as how they selected people for parish councils. I need to make a list of these things. I'm going to save that for another time too, but that was a case of this man coming to me for a purpose. And there was, he was able to talk, but he couldn't look at me directly. But he gave me that message. I said my name twice. Run for the parish council. Or take my place on the parish council. Take my place on the parish council. Then, after these amazing events occurred, the next morning I woke up and I just heard, he had a great sense of humor, this man did. He was just laughing and laughing at how I had gotten on the parish council. To the great consternation, when the priest got back after that weekend, he'd been gone for the weekend. The associate priest was there, but it is quite a story. So stay tuned for that one. God was using me to expose something that was wrong, was really offensive to the Holy Spirit even. They used, and against people, taking advantage of people's good natures, the parishioners, and their trust. And God wasn't going to have anything to do with that and didn't want it, and wanted and set me up through this man who had passed, because I knew him. I was good friends with him, older man, and my parents were friends with them, even though they were Catholic. The dichotomy of it all, they were good friends, but yet behind the scenes, we never want their kids to date a Catholic or marry a Catholic forever, for pity's sakes, or least of all become one. So, but they understand now, of course. All these parents do who are feeling like that, or anybody who was against Catholics, or Catholics who maybe were, awful to Protestants or something. I generally don't find that, but I'm sure we're human. We do all kinds of stuff, but that was a case where it wasn't really to show me where this man was, but in knowing the signals and the setup of how, if someone does come back to us for some reason, message or a need or to help with something, we can pretty much gauge if they are in purgatory or in process of continuing spiritual journey and purification process, or if they're not, and sort of how far along in their spiritual process. And of course, if it's a matter of us stopping to pray for them, we should continue praying unless we have a genuine affirmation that they are, and we still pray, because that's conversation with loved ones. And still we talk to our loved ones or friends who have passed on. And they can help us and talk to us. We just have to be aware. Gently wipe away the fog off our windshields, off our temporal windshields. So, and then always discern, of course. So, okay, I'm going to stop on that, and I think I will tomorrow maybe finish up with this fourth doctrine, or basic aspects of what God told Catherine in general, as far as our spiritual progression after we have passed during this life, but very much so after we have died to this life, and then either in our hell of our own creation, our own not creation, but our own doing. All right, God bless His real presence in us, and I'll share a little bit more about experiences that I've had with people who were on the other side, and situations with them. God bless His real presence in us, and let us continue to love, to learn to love, and to come to that beautiful, pure love of God. Have a beautiful evening, a deep, rich sleep, and may the angels sing to us in their choirs, sing to us to sleep and have good rest. Good night.